Now, with Georgia's 92 votes, Don Farmer, Monica Kaufman, and political reporter Bill Nigut.
Hello. We are told by election officials in Fulton and DeKalb County that the reason we don't have any local numbers as yet.
With me here is Paul Coverdell. Let me ask you first off, do you know any numbers that we don't know about how well you're doing?
No, it's too early, John. What you're seeing here is what everybody's seeing.
You know, there were some people that didn't give Paul Coverdell a chance. You know, they said there's no way you're going to be able to beat an incumbent senator. We were very low on money because we spent most of it during the primary, and then we had a primary runoff. Meanwhile, the incumbent who we were running against in the general election, White Fowler, was sitting on a large pot of money.
A lot of Paul's key staff, the people that he'd been close to for years, didn't think he would even survive past November.
She is 73-year-old Margie Lopp. She is the woman you see swinging on the porch down in South Georgia singing the anti-White Fowler Paul Coverdell song. Margie Lopp, how you doing? You're a celebrity, aren't you? We're not going to make you sing. You feel good about
Paul Coverdell's name identification was, we were running against an incumbent in the general election. So during the primary, his name identification, increased some. He was much better known in the Atlanta area because he represented Atlanta or parts of Atlanta in the state legislature. But people who were out around the state didn't really know him. We needed to do something very quickly to get Senator Coverdell's name ID up. White Fowler started running television ads. It was either the end of August or beginning of September before the November election. We didn't have the resources to go on television in September.
Probably could not have been any further behind and still been considered in the race. We had, I think, a net of $12,000 that would have been remaining in the bank if we had paid all of our bills. We didn't have to pay all of our bills as we incurred them because different vendors were friends and they would let us run up a tab and we would pay them a little bit every month. But if we had had to pay every bill as of September the 9th, we would have had about $12,000. I had no idea what we were going to do for media, and that was my job, was to determine what to do with the media. For $12,000, what can you do that would get people's attention? And a regular campaign commercial is not going to do it. In football, it's called a Hail Mary. We had to do a Hail Mary in that campaign.
In Mom's mind, nothing was impossible if it was something somebody needed. And she made sure it happened. Think about a time when she was 57 and she and a group of friends were talking about the fact that the small town where she lived could use another taxidermist. And they said, but who would do it? And Mother said, well, I could do that. And the friends with whom she was talking said, no, you can't. It's too bloody and gory. And she said, well, of course I can. And so back then, there weren't online courses, but there were correspondence courses. So she took a correspondence course in taxidermy, and she had a shop for just a short period of time. And then she quit and said, I just did it to show you that I could. She always followed the candidates that were related to our state, that were running for any office, whether it was for the state legislature or the National House of Representatives or Senate. And my brother and I were not always as involved as she was, but she made sure that she kept us up to date on each of the candidates. And so I had heard her mention Paul Coverdell before, but only to say that he was not very well known in the state. And she felt that Paul Coverdell was, in fact, I heard her say this many times, that Paul Coverdell was a statesman, whereas White Fowler was a politician. Paul Coverdell stood for the things that a statesman should stand for being the voice of the people that he represented. And in many examples, she had seen that White Fowler had been very interested in the issues that were more profitable for him individually.
Mother was following the Paul Coverdell campaign, and Paul was way behind in the run against White Fowler, and it was 20 to 30 points. I mean, nobody gave him a chance of winning at the time. And 6 weeks before the election, she wrote a jingle, and she called Coverdell's campaign headquarters, and Tom Perdue answered the phone.
It was September the 9th. There were 2 people in Paul Coverdell's headquarters, I believe, that night, which is very unusual for a campaign. An active campaign in a general election at 7:15 at night should have 10 to 15 people working. Not the staff in Coverdell's campaign. They went home. And I answered the phone, because at that time of night there was nobody to answer the phone, so I answered the phone. And this voice on the other end introduced herself as Margie Lopp from Cuthbert, Georgia. She said, "Well, who is this? I'm looking for Tom Perdue." I said, "Well, I am Tom Perdue." She said, "You know you're losing, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, you need a catchy jingle." And she said, I've written a catchy jingle for Paul. She kept calling it a catchy jingle. And I said, "Well, say it or sing it or read it or whatever you do with your jingle." Still not certain that this wasn't a crank call. And she wouldn't. And I finally said, "Ma'am, if you're real, you just paid a long distance phone call to call up here to tell me that Paul Coverdell is losing. And you said you've written us a jingle and that we need a jingle to win. Would you please sing the damn jingle?" And Margie sang the jingle. And I asked her, did she have it recorded or would she record it and send it to me? I'd like to let some people hear it. She did, and in fact, she sent me the whole tape recorder. She sent me the cassette and the entire tape recorder. And within a week, we had a film crew in Cuthbert.
Let's put Paul Coverdell in the Senate and put White Fowler out. White says prove we don't need him in it and Georgia wants him out. But with Paul Coverdell, we'll have a leader of that, there is no doubt. So vote Paul Coverdell in the Senate and put White Fowler out. Now, Paul needs to catch a jingle, so y'all use that.
And all hell broke loose. People calling wanting their money back. Contributors saying they wanted their money back, that they didn't contribute to a campaign to pay for ads like that.
I walked into the office and I had a stack of pink message slips for the media consultant. The secretary there handed me a stack like this. Most of them said, "Dear Paul, fire your media consultant. That's the worst commercial I've ever seen."
We had just destroyed the campaign and it caught fire. I mean, it caught fire.
We've got a very interesting commercial. This one comes from Georgia, where folks all over the state are humming this tune.
Put Paul Coverdell in the Senate and
put White Fowler out. White says prove we don't need him in it, and Georgia wants him out. But then Paul Coverdell will have a leader, and that there is no doubt. So put Paul Coverdell in the Senate and put White Fowler out.
She's perfect. She's wonderful. I love her, and I think she's a great character, and it's fun. And
it was so memorable. One woman came up to me and said that she had gone into labor for about 8 hours, and she could not get that catchy jingle out of her head. And she said, I sang that jingle to myself for about 8 hours while I was in labor, and she said, it drove me crazy. But people couldn't get it out of their head.
There were morning shows where people would call in and the contest question was, can you sing the Margie Lopp jingle? I mean, it caught fire. And it put Paul back in the campaign in the spotlight. and then he proved he could dance.
From WSB-TV Atlanta, coverage you can count on. This is Channel 2 Action News Night Beat.
That campaign jingle by Margie Lopp proved prophetic. It appears tonight challenger Paul Coverdell unseats Democratic incumbent Wyche Fowler in the U.S. race for Senate.
I've said this a million times since that race. Paul Coverdell would not have gone to the United States Senate without Margie Lopp. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind he would never have been a United States Senator without Margie Lopp.
That should be a lesson to all of us that one person can really be responsible for significant change and really changing the world. And none of that would have happened, Paul's good work, had she not called about that jingle.